Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this policy and resources meeting in June, the 12th of June. Can I just start by saying that it's an honour for me to be in the chair here tonight, and thank my party colleagues. There's only one of them here. We obviously, these positions are all given within our party. Just want a couple of ground rules before I start. I've obviously been chair of a few committees in the past, so basically from here on in, I'm only letting one member in once unless it's a supplementary or a point of order, and I am going to be very rigid on the 3-minute rule. So because we've quite a couple of long reports tonight, so we'll go from there. So we will start off with apologies, and we will go to Sinn Féin. Anybody know of any apologies? Sorry.
Councillor McAduff and
Stephen
McCann. Yeah.
I'll keep you right, Debbie. Councillor Hawkes.
Councillor David Mahan.
Thank you. I can give an apology for Councillor Robert Irvine, and I'm not sure, obviously, Councillor Eddie Ruth, not sure whether he'll be here. I'm not sure if Councillor McPhillips, so, but we'll carry on. Okay, to sign the minutes of the confidential minutes and the confidential minutes of the previous meeting on the 15th of May, that has been done. And now we'll go if there's any declarations of interest. Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, Sharon. All the best for the year ahead.
Thank you.
It's item 5.3 on the SWA Strategic Development Group. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just under the confidential staff matters report, the revised arrangements with the Chief Executive's appraisal, please.
That's fine, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the first item on the agenda, which is number 4, Corporate Services and Governance Directorate Reports. And 4.1, we're going to, when we're in this point, we're also going to bring in some of the correspondence because it is relevant to this part. So 4.1 is to consider report and consultations, paper A, and I'm going to pass over to Louise.
So this is there are no consultation responses for approval this month, so it's recommended that the Council notes the additional information presented on the forthcoming consultation, to which a response will be presented to a future Council meeting. And this is the Equality Impact Assessment on the DFC's initial budget allocations that was published yesterday. In that, they propose a reduction in the rate support grant, and we'll bring a full response to that at the next meeting. And a consultation report submitted since the last PNR committee, and that was on the Northern Ireland Policing Board Community Policing Survey. Thank you.
Thank you for that. There's nobody indicating, so we'll, first of all, can I have a proposer and seconder for that? Councillor Deehan and Councillor Hawkes. Thank you. And now I'm passing over to Chill for the correspondence related to this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There are 3 items of correspondence related to the consultation that Louise had flagged in relation to the initial budget allocation for 24-25. So the first item 6.1 from the Department of the Communities from the Local Government and Housing Regulation Division. And that really spells out the impact of the budget on 2 specific areas within the council. One is the rate support grant, and again there is a significant reduction in the rate support grant for this year, which is very concerning. The second aspect concerns the funding for the labour market partnerships, with an indication that that funding will proceed at a similar level to previous years. Do we wish to take a proposer and seconder to note that, correspondence?
Yes, can I have a proposer and seconder to note, please? Don't all come at once. Councillor Donnelly and Councillor Deacon, thank you.
And the second two items of correspondence are very much closely connected to that, and really from two different divisions within the Department for the Communities, again spelling out the impacts of the budget allocation, the Minister's initial budget allocation for 24-25. One on the community and voluntary sector, so that's 6.2 item 1, and I suppose noted within that there is a slightly enhanced provision for the community voluntary sector, which is welcomed within that correspondence.
Okay, no speakers, so can I have a proposer to Councillor Ovens?
Thank you, Jill. And it's not so much on this correspondence, but I'll just ask a question because I suspect it may be associated or connected to it. This week, quite a few organisations that had applied to the council's grant and community services aid, that grant aid appeal that went out, I think it was February this year, received notification that because they hadn't, or the council hadn't yet been in receipt of an allocation, presumably from DFC, that the council was no longer in a position at this stage to move forward with an allocation. Is that connected to this, or is that something completely separate?
Chair, I think my understanding is that it's more to the Executive Office rather than to DFC. The bulk of the Council's financial support by way of the normal DFC or community support grants would be our own financial support. There would be some specific measures around, for example, good relations and some of the bursaries. That would be the Executive Office support. So we have received no confirmation at this stage as to the Executive Office's decision in relation to the support. Our expectation in terms of the planning as seen from this letter, with the exception of the rate support grant, our expectation is the community support programme should remain broadly similar to previous years. So I would think those letters relate to the lack of an updated position really from the TEO.
Okay. Can I have a proposer? Can we take both of them together? Yeah. Can I have a proposer and seconder for those supplementary? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. And just very briefly, thanks, Chief Executive, appreciate that. But I'm just looking at the update that the applicants received, and it states the funding you've applied for is subject to financial allocation from the Department for Communities, and at this time, an offer of funding has not yet been received by the Council. So it would appear that it isn't TU, that it is more DFC.
It's fine, sorry, I didn't have sight of that. If it specifically relates to DFC, then that would be accurate.
Okay, Councillor Coyle.
Thank you. Yeah, just on that point, because I know a group that's also got that email and mentions Department for Communities, and I was just wondering that the funding grants that went through last night, was that message relating to those grants that went through last night, or are those offers okay? Because there seems to be a mix-up. The community groups don't really know what that message that Mark has mentioned, don't really know what grant that's relating to.
So, Chair, I suppose I'm at a slight disadvantage in that I haven't just the details of the email or the correspondence that's been communicated. Certainly the recommendations and the associated grant aid that went through last night would have been related to the general provision that the Council had made for our own grants. So we certainly wouldn't have been making recommendations and then communicating with groups that we didn't have the financial provision to do so or not to do so. So maybe my suggestion, Chair, is we'll clarify that just between what those specific grants that the groups that have received the communication, what they relate to, and then we'll provide you with an update formally at the Council meeting, but we'll email all members in advance just to ensure there's no ambiguity. And then equally what is outstanding from the Department for Communities by way of clarification.
Okay, proposed by Councillor Coyle. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Donnelly, thank you. We'll move on to 4.2, and this is to consider the report on the annual governance statement for Fermanagh and Omagh District Council for year ending the 31st of March 24. And please note that council powers have been conferred to the committee to deal with this item And now we're over to Catherine. Oh, sorry, Jill again.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper relates to the annual governance statement for the Council, and as members will be aware, the Council is responsible for putting in place proper arrangements for the governance of all its affairs and for the management of risk. And aligned with that, there is a requirement to prepare an annual governance statement, which is attached to Appendix 1, which goes along with the annual accounts for the end of year up to the end of March 2024. The annual governance statement is required to be prepared along with the principles outlined within the framework for delivering good governance in local government. So there's a very prescriptive and a very prescribed framework of for the annual governance statement and how we map against this. And the statement really explains how the Council meets those obligations under the requirements under the Local Government Act in terms of internal controls. So the annual governance statement was presented to the audit panel at its meeting on the 3rd of June and is brought here to the Policy and Resources for approval. There are a number of key elements, as you will see throughout the governance statement, which outline the systems and processes that comprise the overall governance arrangements in the Council. So some of those to note. There is a requirement that we would clearly identify and communicate the vision and the purpose of the Council to citizens and service users, and there is an outline of how that has been achieved. That we would measure the quality of the services that we deliver for citizens, that we would define and clearly document the roles and the responsibilities within the organisation, both within the executive function, the scrutiny and officer functions, and the delegation arrangements within those, and that's laid out very clearly within the Constitution. There is guidelines on the codes of conduct. There is adherence to risk management and demonstrating the effectiveness of the framework that we have for risk managing, for managing risks and our accountability in that regard. There is very specific requirements in terms of the financial arrangements and of key roles within the Council, the role of the Chief Executive as the Chief Financial Officer and the role of the Head of Internal Audit, and it's outlined within the governance statement how we adhere to the requirements for both those roles. There is elements around the role of the Audit Committee and the important function that it plays in terms of scrutiny. Others, just a couple to pick out. There is a requirement to identify development needs for both members and senior officers in relation to the roles and ensure that appropriate training is provided. And there is also a requirement to demonstrate good governance around our arrangements in respect of partnerships. So the key partnerships, strategic partnerships that we have, community planning partnership, and there is also some detail on the governance arrangements around the Mid-South West growth deal. So in terms of governance, the Council has responsibility for, at least annually, conducting a review of the effectiveness of our governance arrangements. And there's a very robust process behind that. There is both really a top-down and a bottom-up approach. So across each of the service areas, the heads of service prepare a very detailed governance statement, and they review all of the areas that they're responsible for, and in terms of the governance of all those aspects, in terms of the risk management, in terms of the audits around each areas, they prepare an insurance statement, which is then provided to the directors, who collate all that information and again apply a level of scrutiny and challenge around that to ensure that effective governance is in place, and then that is reviewed by the Chief Executive. So that's the process. Also aligned with that, from an audit point of view, the Head of Internal Audit carries out a review of effectiveness of the audit function and looks at really the outcomes of all the audit reports in year. And provides a considered opinion in terms of the overall control environment of the Council. And that was reported to the audit panel recently, which noted that the overall control environment was of a good standard and should be categorised as satisfactory. The final aspect then of the governance statement identifies the significant risks to the Council, the strategic risks which are in place, and again, those have been identified through discussions, through work of the audit panel, and also through analysis of both the internal and external risk register. So there are 4 strategic risks identified around financial uncertainty and resilience, around cybersecurity and digital services, around legal issues and industrial relations, and in terms of climate change. And there is more detail provided on each of those risks within the governance statement. So in terms of recommendations, it is recommended that the Council approves the annual governance statement for the Council for the year ending the 31st of March 2024 and gives approval to the Chairperson of the Policy and Resources Committee to sign the annual governance statement.
Okay, you've heard that report given. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Robbins.
You, Jill, just have a couple of quick queries. Jill, I thought a number of months ago that I had proposed, it was either at this committee or perhaps a meeting of the full council, that all council members would get access to the audit panel reports and meetings and meeting papers, and that they'd be uploaded through Decision Time or whatever the appropriate mechanism was. Has that happened yet? Because I haven't noticed them appearing on Decision Time. So firstly, clarity on that point, and then secondly, it's in relation to, I mean, I'll not rehearse the arguments tonight, but I mean, over the last 12 months, I personally have raised a number of concerns in terms of my perspective of where this council is in terms of governance and transparency, or perhaps a lack of transparency on how decisions are made over finance. But I look at 2.3, subparagraph 3, where it talks about that the council would measure the quality of services for users through a citizen satisfaction survey. Now, I note the last one was a number of years ago and that there's one planned for later this year. So it would just be a query in terms of what that would actually look like in terms of, you know, how are the questions set? Do they go to committee? You know, what learnings are taken from any subsequent report? Thank you.
Okay, yeah, no, happy to take those 2 queries. On the first, in relation to the audit panel papers, so absolutely we have considered that, and it was discussed at the audit panel in June. So the proposal in place is that those would be uploaded to Decision Time at the point where the audit panel minutes are shared with the Policy and Resources Committee. So the audit panel minutes for June will be shared at the July Policy and Resources Committee. The papers will be uploaded onto Decision Time and available. I suppose the minutes provide the context for the papers. So certainly that will happen, and those will be available for the July meeting and subsequently for future meetings. And that was agreed with the audit panel at the meeting in June. The second query in terms of the citizen satisfaction survey. So there are a number of ways, both at a service level and on a manual level, and indeed then the very significant resident survey, that we measure the level of satisfaction with residents. So I suppose the largest intervention is the resident survey. So we have done those large resident surveys, and those are externally commissioned. They're aligned with the data services and with the community planning process. And I suppose quite an extensive piece of work is going around that in terms, there tends to be standard questions in those, so we can track performance over, there's been 2 previous, one 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, and another previous. So there tends to be a number of standard questions in those, so we can see where we are and benchmark against previous performance. But I do understand there is scope to bring in new questions, and certainly I would think that if members wish to see those questions in advance, that's possible. Those are, yeah. So in terms then of other mechanisms to track customer satisfaction, so for example, the customer service advisors, there is a feedback mechanism for those, and across a number of key services areas, there's individual, for example, leisure, theatres, tourism, there is individual feedback and measures and mechanisms to track customer satisfaction, and that's outlined in the governance statement. There is also to flag new procedures in terms of complaints. The Public Sector Ombudsman has brought in a new model complaints handling procedure for all local government across Northern Ireland, and there is very detailed guidelines on how we track complaints, how we report on complaints, and very, very critically, how we demonstrate meaningful learning from complaints and meaningful improvement. So that has been in place from the start of the year, and there is a reporting cycle. I think the first report is due to be brought to members after a 6-month period, and there is an annual report on that, which also feeds into the, I suppose, tracking customer satisfaction piece and responding there.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to add in terms of the resident survey. So the methodology is generally reported through for approval, but also a series of focus groups were held as well as the surveys themselves. And the sample would have also been peer reviewed and assessed. So it is, as Jill has indicated, quite a comprehensive piece of work. One of the most notable findings over the last number of resident surveys is the, I suppose, confusion maybe in the eyes of the public over who is responsible for what service, and quite a bit of commentary often relates to that. So.
Okay. Can I have a proposer, please, for the recommendations in that report? Proposed by Councillor Green. Can I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hawkes. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on now to 4.3, and this is to consider the report on draft financial position for the year ending 31st of March, and we're over to Catherine this time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So paper C then looks at the draft financial position, both from a revenue, income and expenditure, and a capital position. And noting in the first section, I suppose reflecting right back to the estimates process and when they were approved by the Council on the 9th of February 2023, which does seem some time ago now. The net expenditure at that stage to be funded was 44.8 million, with a capital plan at that point in time revised later on through the estimates process for the current year with an anticipated spend of 11.7 million. I suppose a bit like the previous report, the draft financial position was also presented to the Council's audit panel on its meeting last week. And since then, members, and actually since we've uploaded the financial position, there has been some additional items of income and expenditure brought in, but absolutely not significant to the overall position and not significant in terms of what we're reporting today. So it is always a fluid process right up until the point at which we present them for approval and authorisation. The outturn, members, for the year end does reflect on the management accounts position as reported through to the Policy and Resources Committee meeting on a monthly basis. And the net spend, just at the top of page 2, is 39.3 million against a budget of 43.3 million. Item 2.4, members, highlights significant variance, and as I said, those variances remain in line with those reported through to the committee and yourselves over the past number of months. So noting on a very positive position a 1.58 million increase of income actually received against budget, so that's very positive. And I suppose going forward, that level of income has been included within the 24-25 estimates. So that income is right across council facilities, including leisure centres, tourist facilities and theatres, off-street car parking, recycling income, and some additional central government support for direct service areas. Overall net savings, members, and staff costs of 1.1 million, primarily due to a reduction in staff costs with the current recruitment processes, which does include a continuous review of vacant posts and, as always then, the timing of the appointment into a post where there has been a resignation of a post that has been required to be refilled. Reduction in costs, members, of 1.1 million, a budget for electricity, heat and other utilities, and mainly due, as previously presented, to the unit price reduction. There's a small reduction as well in the waste handling costs. And overall, members, then, and these are actually highlighted, it's something new we've done this year, and we always try to improve the reporting on it. We've actually highlighted those at the very top of Appendix 1. So just reporting to yourselves, one, by type of expenditure and income, and then secondly, by service area, income and expenditure. So whilst the variance for the other expenditure is only 52,000, you do look behind that to tell the story. And it does include the additional bank investment income of 1.2 million, of which 873 has been transferred to reserves. It does include expenditure in the year that was funded directly from reserves, so there would have been other funds transferred to, sorry if I can say that correctly, transferred to council reserves last year for operating spend. So there would have been some grants that we'd received very late on in the day, and that expenditure happened. And just unfortunately for reporting purposes, the income comes in up above, and then when we move down to the transfers, you see the additional transfer coming in. So that doesn't have any additional cost to the council in the year. So it's welcome to get, as well as that, additional grant income over budget of 550,000. I do note, members, that the variations do take into account overspend in excess of budget across a number of small budget areas, and that those budgets across those operational centres will require further monitoring in 24-25. In addition to the income being projected in 24-25 at current levels, obviously we have taken into account as part of the estimates process for 24-25 those cost savings as a result of the electricity and utility charge reductions. On another positive note, members, at 2.5, this has been a very long process, which this council, as well as the other 10 councils, have been involved in a VAT reclaim from HMRC for overpaid VAT on leisure facilities under a special legal regime. And I am delighted to note, members, that the council has received 3.17 million of VAT repayment, which is going right back. I just can't remember the year now, but it's definitely 2008, 2009 to date. So that has been a very long, outstanding process. And there's a recommendation, members, within the report for the utilisation of that exceptional income at this point in the day. We literally just received it a number of weeks back. And there's a small final balance to be claimed up until the 30th of June, and that will be forthcoming. The draft financial position, members, then also includes the financing of capital expenditure, which is a normal expense, and that amounted to 2.568 million against a budget of 2 million. And in previous months, members, we increased the cost of the capital financing within the budget as we reviewed the capital expenditure plans for 23-24. That includes, in the majority, the repayment of borrowings, so they're just external borrowings for the council, and then a direct charge onto the income and expenditure account for some of the capital expenditure. In terms of financing, members, then again positive for the council. So the D-rating grant, members, has the indicative figures, and the figures from central government are obviously subject to audit, just as the figures and are for the council. So there's an additional 71,000 of D-rating grant, which brings the D-rating grant to just over 2.45 million. The rate support grant is the less positive note, and I know it's been mentioned earlier on tonight. So income was received of 337,000, which was 262,000 less than we had estimated within. So that it's really disappointing, and very disappointing to note a further reduction for the 24-25 estimates. The transferred function grant then, members, it is in line with the estimates, and that's on the basis of which the transferred functions grant is calculated as a percentage increase on a non-domestic revaluation. And then rates income from the rates base, members, and initial indication figures from Land and Property Services would indicate that the council will receive an additional £281,000. That is positive. It's significantly below the amount that we were presenting to yourselves last year. I think it was about 800,000. So it does show quietening down and maybe moving forward within Land and Property Services in terms of what the rate space is looking like, because that's at a point in time what the number of assets, whether they be domestic or business properties within the rating position. That position of rate support grant, we haven't had any situation where the amount hasn't actually been repaid to the full amount, but it does include significant estimations, and there is a lot of work going on at the moment within Land and Property Services in relation to irrecoverable or potential irrecoverable debt. So just to note that that is a welcome figure, but it's always subject to change as we move into the current year. The capital spent, members, there's an appendix 2 on an overview by category as such on capital expenditure, but the draft position would include a spend of just under 9 million, so 8.98 million against a proposed capital spend of 11.7. And having done a detailed review, members, the majority, if not all projects, have commenced. Just maybe the spend towards the 31st of March hasn't just achieved the level that was anticipated in the estimates, but those projects are ongoing and will transfer into the current year. The proposed funding, members, is the use of council reserves of 5.9 million, external grant of 1.8 million, and the revenue transfers or the direct cost on the income and expenditure of 1.2 million. Capital receipts of 321,000 were received in year from the disposal of a small amount of small assets within the council's estate, but the majority of that were related to receipt of income from the felling of sections of Ecclesville Forest. The capital receipts, members, will be transferred to the council's capital receipts reserve in line with the Finance Act NI 2011. Members, this financial position is still draft. As I said earlier on, it will be supported by Prudential and Treasury indicators, and it will be subject to audit, and the final statement of accounts may vary slightly, and I do think it's very slightly at this stage, as in the reported surplus, maybe just slightly less than what I'm presenting tonight. Just in terms of proposed transfers then, members, due to the positive outturn position relative to the estimates process, Section 2.9 details, members, a number of proposed transfers to reserves subject to your approval this evening. You will note on Table 2.9 that 1.5 million of those transfers have previously been approved by this committee on the 17th of April. By way of just summation on the reserve transfers, the election costs within the estimate of 70,000 proposal is that we increase that to 100,000, which is very much in line with the current estimates or the current cost for the election back in May last year of just 396,000. So that's just literally taking the 400,000 divided by 4 that the council will have enough potentially to meet. The financial position, members, does take account of the utilisation of the COVID contingency reserve of 1.6 million. That was what was included in the estimates that were approved. It also takes account of the use of a COVID contingent reserve for community support grant aid that was undertaken during the year, and that's 300,000. So that expenditure has come in this current year, but the money had been set aside in the previous year. Bank interest, members, as I previously mentioned, and again in line with the Accounting Code of Practice, significant volume, I can't get the words out, sorry, element of that reserves or interest will go to specified reserves. So there's a technical calculation behind which we work out how much of the reserves attributes bank interest, and the alternative element then goes to the income and expenditure account as investment income. The income then, members, from the leisure centre reclaim for VAT of 3.17 million is proposed that is transferred to a capital reserve. And then the balance then, members, of 2.2 million, it is proposed also within the recommendation to transfer that to the council's capital fund. Overall, members, the draft position, when we take account of income and expenditure of the day-to-day operating services, when we take account of financing of the capital plan, and we take account of the income that is due from centre support and from the rates base, the draft position is £163,634 of a surplus, which will increase the council's general fund, so that the balance on the income and expenditure account, it transfers to the council's general fund balance, which will increase that balance to just under 4.5 million. And that's in line with the minimum general fund balance that was set for 23-24 as part of the estimates. Just to note also, members, that the council's usable reserves, that excludes capital grants, will remain in the region of 22 million. So that's very positive, having attributed just under £6 million of the council's reserves to the capital spend in the year. Just in relation to the overall financial position then, members, it may, as I said, vary. So the position tonight, members, is income and expenditure. Actual income and expenditure, cash income and expenditure, but on an accruals basis. So the next stage, and the stage we're currently working through in terms of producing a statement of accounts, is to account for a number of accounting principles and policies, and they all relate to non-cash expenditure and income. This is where the council's accounts get very complicated. So we actually compare the council's accounts on a rates-based position, and then we also, under the Accounting Code of Practice and compliance with legislation, must present the accounts in line with accounting standards and take account of, for example, under 3.2, retirement benefits, the accounting for the closure and aftercare of the council's landfill sites, and the valuation of freehold and leasehold properties. And there are a number of other non-cash accounting adjustments, in relation to employee benefits, provision accounting and depreciation charges which are applied to fixed assets. Just at 3.4 then, members, just to note that on conclusion by myself and my team, on subject to Jill's review, the unaudited statements of accounts will be certified by Alison on or before the 30th of June. And as Jill mentioned in her previous report, the unaudited statement of accounts will include the annual governance statement that was presented in the previous paper. Members, at that point in time, the unaudited statements of accounts can be made available to the Policy and Resources Committee members and indeed full council. Just noting that they are potentially to be subject to change before September, when the publication date is the 30th of September. So as we reach the end of June, audit will come into the council, either online, virtually or in presence, and audit the entire financial statements, present an opinion which will be presented back then through to the audit panel, and in the interim then we will also present the updated financial statements of accounts to the Policy and Resources Committee meeting in September. Members, the recommendations are at section 9 of the meeting, or the report, sorry. So it's to note the draft financial position for the Council for 31st of March 2024, that the Council approves a transfer of 100,000 to the election reserve, approves a transfer of 1.9 million from the Council's COVID contingency reserve, approves a transfer of 873,000 to specified reserves, and approves a transfer of 5.373,500 to the capital fund reserve. And obviously the element of that there is a 2.2 million plus 3.1 million of the VAT reclaim. Also, members, just to note the reliance placed on third-party advisors for their expertise in relation to some of the accounting principles just mentioned, and that the officers now proceed to finalise the unaudited statement of accounts for signing by Alison as Chief Financial Officer, which will then be submitted to the Department for Communities and the Northern Ireland Audit Office on or before the 30th of June. So we're aiming towards the end of next week, hopefully, Jill, if that works out. So thank you, Chair.
Okay. Okay. Any comments? Councillor Green.
Yeah, a very comprehensive report again, Catherine, thank you. Just on 3.17 million being transferred to the capital reserve, I suppose the name sums it up, but I'll ask the question anyway. What can that be used for? Is that for capital projects that the council can and will be doing in the future?
Thank you, Councillor Green. So when we were producing the medium-term plan for 24-25 for yourselves as a council, I did include anticipation that the council would receive the VAT reclaim. So in terms of financing of the capital plan or the medium-term plan over the next couple of years, that £3 million has been taken into account already as part of the plan. So, the plan will change as we go forward every year. So it is absolutely earmarked if this proposal goes through tonight for capital development. And just to clarify that within the financing of the existing, which is a fairly significant capital plan, that has already been included within the financing of the medium-term plan over the next 5 years.
Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second the recommendations there. Seamus, you did propose.
Seamus, are you proposing them? Okay.
Yeah, and thank you, Catherine, for the report. It's very extensive. I just want to commend officers on all the efforts throughout the year to make the efficiencies in all our services. It's been amazing what has been achieved. I know a few of the things in terms of energy savings and so on, it's just been a bonus, but a lot of work has gone into ensuring we had those efficiencies. And I think if we continue that in the years ahead, that's a good way to go in terms of making sure we get value for money for our ratepayers. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ovens.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Catherine. And I suppose before I say anything else, a big well done on the VAT reclaim. That's a very significant outcome for the council, and I think I picked you up right. That applies to all councils, does it, in terms of Northern Ireland? So, that's a very significant and very positive outcome. So
yeah, it's all councils. Councillor, yeah, thank you.
So big well done on that. I just have a few minor issues really, Catherine, on it. In terms of, firstly, I appreciate you had the figure of was it the 160,000 or 180,000 surplus at the end of the year on these accounts. But I think it's important that we remember, just as committee members, that that is just the position as it sits today. But ultimately, for the 12-month look back, from my reading of these accounts, we're ending in a position of almost 4 million underspend. And I mean, we have regularly talked about the underspend and the trajectory this council has been on throughout the last 12 months. But I do think it's worth noting that this is the second year in a row where this council has ended in quite a significant underspend. And we're doing that at a time when this council is doing less than it previously did in terms of some core service delivery. So that's something we as council members should reflect upon, I feel, because I do think whilst it's better ending in an underspend than an overspend, I do think to what cost, and I look particularly at the likes of some of the savings within, and you referenced it on overtime, and we know the implications and the damage that's having in terms of core service delivery. Just in terms of, and it's I suppose related to that last point, looking at one service area in particular, and it's the one at the very top of the list, waste management, I see we ended with a 2% variance. It's 2% underspend, which on the whole, to a very big budget of over 14 million, is quite a successful outcome. So that's a good thing. But I do note we ended the end of March with a 2% variance, but at the end of February, we had a 6% variance. So my question would be, what has happened in those 4 weeks of March that brought that underspend so significantly down? I mean, did we renew licenses? Did we? Presumably we didn't buy equipment because that would be capital, and if we did, that wouldn't count to these figures. So there's the question on that. Then just a minor question in terms of where that 17% figure on wellbeing and cultural services comes from, just in terms of a little bit of background, because that does seem quite a significant underspend or variance over a 12-month look back. And then I suppose my final point, Chair, would be, and it goes to Councillor Green's point about, we seem to be regularly transferring back into capital reserves, which I understand. But I mean, are we doing that primarily because of what's coming down the line in terms of Lakeland Forum development? Because I know the costs have gone up again on that. And then if we do transfer into capital, because I just think it's very easy to transfer from reserve to capital, but quite often it's not just as easy to transfer back from capital to reserve. So do those limitations still apply at local government? Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for your comments, Councillor. So yes, there is a variation of the 4%. I suppose when you do your actual final position, you will absolutely, as a team of accountants, will go through every single line of income and expenditure. And, there can be variations from one month to the next. So there would have been additional accruals, additional spend. So we take a significant review, particularly within that service area, you said the budget is significant in comparison to the entire council budget. So it literally would relate mainly to additional costs of the same type of costs. There's nothing extra in that. I'm looking through the detailed review here myself, and the electricity might have come down a little bit. The income that was projected from recycling in 1 month to the next month might have been slightly different. The landfill tax does vary in relation to the tonnages of waste. So there is nothing really different in that, only really tying down through all of the costs and bringing those together. And there has been some small overspends actually in relation to those areas on recycling centres and in the garages in the previous month, which do add up to the actual variance overall in that service area. So there's nothing different really, except really crunching down, like I always say, management accounts, but we'll take a very detailed review of nearly every level of expenditure above £2,000 or £3,000 to make sure that it's included in the right financial year. So there's nothing really different in that one at all. In terms of CW, so that's community and wellbeing, and as you rightly referred to, it's a variance, so it's not always an underspend. Members in this position here, and it refers back to the main line under the operating expenditure, it's predominantly income generating service. Absolutely. The leisure services are in there, the 4 leisure centres are in there, the Marble Arch Caves is in, the theatres, so all of those income generating service areas apart from off-street car parking all are within community and wellbeing, and therefore add significantly to the variance, the positive variance against budget. The proposal in relation to the transfer to the capital fund, members, the council has a financial reserves policy, and within it has the general fund, which is the operating day-to-day expenditure, and it has mainly only then got capital reserves. So there are reserves for the future, for future capital spend, coupled with the COVID contingency resilience reserve, and there are some contingency reserves. So I suppose the options for members is either to transfer to a capital fund, which I would suggest is good practice to meet further plans, or to transfer to leave it in the general fund, which would be well in excess of the amount set by the council, or to transfer to a contingency. And I don't believe the contingency reserves need that level of transfer. So yes, it can only be utilised then, if it's in the capital fund, it can only be utilised then for future capital spend. Yeah.
Councillor Deehan.
Thank you, Chair, and I would like to add my support for these recommendations and to commend thank Catherine for her report, and to commend her and her team for producing this report. I think it leaves this council in a very happy position, and I think as members we are all appreciative of that. Not all councils would be in such a strong financial position, and I think members are very much aware that a lot of this is down to the hard work and the ingenuity and the looking at every item of our expenditure and where costs can be made. I'm very impressed by the savings that we've been able to make. For example, in staff costs, over $1 million, and then reduced costs against costs for electricity, heat and other utilities, 1.1 million. And then I think the icing on the cake is the 3.17 million, which the council pursued HMRC for successfully. There was a lot of work in that. It took a lot of time and effort, and it has paid dividends. I support very strongly transfers into our capital development fund, because we have many projects in the pipeline, costs are going up, and if there are opportunities for transferring into our capital reserves, then I fully support that. So happy to support the recommendation, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Green, did you not hear me at the start of the meeting?
There was a comment made by another councillor, and I just want to ask a question in relation to that, but not an open forum. Will I wait confidential items, or can we do it now?
Okay, we'll begin into confidential anyway, so. Okay, those recommendations have all been proposed and seconded. We'll now move on to item 4.4, paper D, and that's to consider a report on procurement and tenders. And it's back over to Catherine again.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Members, so within the report tonight under 2.1, there is one contract to be extended and the extension requests for 4 annual tenders. Within section 2.2, members, then there are 4 tenders to be issued. And then members, for noting, under section 3 are 4 tenders that have been awarded in the period from the last meeting. There's quite a long list of approvals, members, at section 9.1, Chair, so if they're okay, they're listed there in relation to those extensions of the various contracts, the issue of tenders for various service, and that the council notes the tenders awarded in this report and the use of 2 further procurement frameworks.
Okay, you've seen the report. Can I have a proposer for the recommendations, please? Councillor Deehan, and a seconder? Councillor Donnelly. Okay, we'll move on to item 4.5, and that's a report on staff matters, paper E, and it's over to Thelma.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, the report on staff matters is one item for decision making, and then we have 3 items for noting. So I'll take you through. The first item is in relation to approval to implement additional closure dates at Christmas. I know it's early in the year to be talking, but just for planning purposes, we do like to make plans well ahead. Chair, with your permission, one slight amendment to the report. After consideration, we were looking at opening on Monday, the 23rd of December, but with it just being one day that week, we're actually looking now to propose that we would close the building rather than opening just for the one day that week. So it would mean a closure would start from the 23rd of December and reopen again on Thursday, the 2nd of January. So that's the approval we're looking for in relation to the Christmas closure dates, Chair. As I say, apologies that we reviewed that just earlier this week and have come forward with a slightly different recommendation than was in the paper. Then the items, Chair, in the report for noting, we have the end of year absence report, and it is attached as an appendix to the report. Some of the summary information, I suppose the key data, is contained there in 3.1.2. And you will see that our absence levels are higher than the previous year, and certainly they're one of the highest levels of sickness absence we've had over the last 5 years. We do anticipate having further benchmarking information from other councils, but I suppose informally I've been advised by colleagues that I think most organisations are in a similar position at the moment with extremely high levels of sickness absence. Just last month, Chair, we did approve the update of the managing attendance and the wellbeing risk assessment policies, and we will be implementing a programme of training to support those for both managers and staff. I've also given just a little bit of summary there just in terms of the health promotion initiatives that we do as well. And obviously those play a significantly important role within managing and supporting our employees' health and wellbeing. The next item, Chair, for noting is the annual contribution that we pay to NILGA, but it is really for the national employers, for the work that the national employers do for the Council in relation to national pay negotiations. And then that relates to the final item for noting in the paper, which is an update and attached at Appendix 2 to the report is the national employers' final pay offer, which has been made and which trade unions are currently consulting their members with. So a range of consultation periods there, but hoping that sort of mid-July we would have a decision back from trade unions in relation to the final pay offer that has been made, and it's summarised there in paragraph 3.3 for information. So, Chair, the recommendations are that the Council approves the Christmas closure dates with the amendment that I outlined to you, and that we note the end-of-year absence report for 23-24, the payment of the annual contribution to NILGA in respect of the national employer and related external partnership work, and note the update in relation to local government pay for 24-25.
Okay, you've heard the report and the recommendations. There's nobody indicating, so could I have a proposer, please, on that? Councillor Hawkes, and bit of a seconder. Councillor Deehan, thank you. We will now move on to item 4.6, and that's to consider the report of the Director of Corporate Service and Government.
Thank you, Chair. So there is just one item for noting in this report, and that's to present the revised health and safety policy. So a very significant review has been carried out on the health and safety policy within the Council. I suppose it's our most important policy in terms of the health and safety and well-being of all our staff and elected members. So the additions and changes are marked in red and strike throughout the policy. I would draw your attention to, in particular, page 4 of the policy just at this juncture, and a specific new addition to the policy is that we have a very clear definition on individual roles and responsibilities for health and safety. That's a new addition, and there is a clear outline of the role and responsibility of elected members in terms of health and safety, and some guidelines there in terms of that. I suppose health and safety, as you'll all know, is all our responsibility within the organisation. So if everyone is content, the recommendation is that the Council notes the revised health and safety policy.
Okay, there's Councillor Coyle.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'll note the report and the thing, but I'm just wondering, I'm sure they're separate to this, but it does tie in with the health and well-being of staff, and looking at the report that we just looked at with the high increase, I'm just wondering if there are policies and stuff around drug and alcohol, addiction support there for staff that may have drug, alcohol, or gambling addictions. I know that there was a domestic abuse policy done back in 2018, whether that's been updated for any workers, and also around lone working, the support that there is for staff that are lone working, because there's quite a high percentage of staff with work-related stress, and I'm sure for some people, some of that will be there, and that, is there, proper support for them other than going online looking for it, that there's trained managers that can deal with them issues as they come along. But other than that, I'm more than happy to pose it.
Certainly happy to come back on that, and all those areas that you've mentioned in terms of alcohol and addiction policies, lone working support policies, and the third one that you'd mentioned as well, and domestic abuse, absolutely. There is policies that are regularly reviewed. There's a regular review policy cycle, and there is a whole suite of support policies for staff in place. But as you rightly identify, that's only really one intervention. We have a very active health and wellbeing group within the organisation, and on a weekly basis, there are support interventions for all staff and then individual groups of staff. So there's a very strong programme for female staff, particularly, and also for male staff. So they consider the range of need at the minute, and we've just closed off our annual health and wellbeing survey. So that's a survey that goes out to all staff and takes a pulse really check in terms of the health and the well-being, both the physical health and the mental health of all our staff, and also seeks input and recommendations on what new ideas or what new initiatives that they would like to see. And it's actually it's a great survey. We've had a great response rate or whatever, and there's great feedback and input from staff so that we can tailor the suite of programmes and the suite of support to all staff. And an update on that health and wellbeing survey will be brought forward.
Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair. Just a general point on our health and safety policy, and that, I suppose, for us as councillors, we'll say a report comes to us and it gives a health and safety reason of why a business case or something is torn down, and one of the reasons has a health and safety issue. What would happen if councillors then forced a policy through in contravention of that stated issue on health and safety? If something happened in the future, for instance, and some citizen got injured or badly hurt or worse, because that was forced through, would the council be liable, or would the individual councillors be liable?
So I can comment and then bring in the Chief Executive. So we have a very specific business case process for spend that is directly related to statutory responsibilities for health and safety. So there's a special business case process where if spend is required to fulfil our statutory responsibilities in terms of health and safety, that's taken through that process and considered as a priority, absolutely as a priority for essential spend. So that hopefully will give members some reassurance. I suppose the question you asked in terms of the legal liability, that I suppose we would have to consider on a case-by-case basis. Alison, maybe?
Thank you, Chair. I suppose the starting position would be, as members will know, we live in an increasingly litigious society. So I think should the circumstances arise that Councillor Green has set out, any injured party would in the first instance seek to pursue the council corporately, but then potentially to pursue the individual member or members for any risk or liability that they perceive to the decision or to their input to it. I think the most likely scenario would be in those circumstances, and if it was something that caused such significant concern, there would be the potential for surcharge against the member, because it would be, or member or members, it would be directly contrary to advice and something that's potentially putting the council corporately at risk.
Okay. Yes. Seamus, are you happy enough to second? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, that's been proposed and seconded. So we will move on now to section 5, which is the Chief Executive's Department Reports, and 5.1, which is the consider the minutes of the Rural Affairs Subcommittee meeting held on the 2nd of May.
Thank you, Chair. Just the proposer and seconder, please, for the adoption of the minutes. That's all we require for this evening.
Okay, good. Councillor Green.
Yeah, I think I chaired that one for the chair, wasn't there, so I'll propose.
Okay, can I have a seconder? Councillor Deacon, thank you. Okay, we'll move on now to consider the report of the nominations to the council subcommittees and related matters, paper H.
Thank you, Chair. So there are a few items within this paper, members. Firstly, in paragraph 2.1, we set out the details of the council's existing subcommittees, and it would be the norm for those not to be dealt with at the annual meeting, but at the relevant committee, which is this evening. So in the report, I've included the existing composition of the committees. My assumption is members would still wish to continue with those, and to date, we haven't been advised of any changes to the nominations. And similarly, last year, Chair, it was also agreed that the chairs of the subcommittees and working groups would rotate annually on the basis of party strength. So therefore, a member of the Ulster Unionist Party would chair each of the aforementioned subcommittees in the forthcoming year. The second item on the report is attendance at committees and speaking rights. I've just noted, Chair, that we haven't restricted attendance at meetings previously, but this certainly, I know, regularises it. In terms of the speaking rights proposal, it's suggested that any member who's not on the committee who wishes to seek speaking rights would email Democratic Services by no later than 12 noon on the day before the meeting in question, and just identifying the item or items against which they would wish to speak. And just, I suppose, for clarity, Chair, to confirm that there are no changes to the existing speaking rights arrangements for the Planning Committee. And lastly, in terms of the July committee meetings, members will be aware we had previously agreed the schedule, and this was obviously in advance of the calling of the general election for the 4th of July. So I know I've certainly received some queries regarding what alternate options would be available. So in the report, I've suggested that we can obviously run the committees as currently scheduled, Chair, but I appreciate there would be other demands on members' times that week. But a potential option would be to convene the 3 committees, so that's Environmental Services, Regeneration and Community, and Policy and Resources, at 2 p.m, 4 p.m, and 7 p.m, respectively, on Tuesday, the 2nd of July. We would still meet as normal at 7 p.m. on the Monday evening for Council, and there would be no change to either the Planning Committee or the Council meeting at the end of the month. And I've just highlighted, Chair, that should members, it wasn't discussed at the Council meeting, and therefore we don't have Council powers. But there does seem to me, from inputs I've received, to be a broad consensus that we should move to the stacked meetings on the Tuesday afternoon. And if that was the case, I suppose it would just be with members' understanding that we would progress without Council ratification of that course of action. So happy to take any queries, Chair.
Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the speaking rights for the members who aren't on the committees. I'm not so sure whether we would need to have send an email the day before. I know maybe it's because of seating arrangements, but like, I don't think all 40 councillors are going to turn up anyway. So as long as you have access to a mic on the night, my take on what would have happened would be that if, for instance, if I turned up, I'm not on environmental services, that I could come in on any subject during the night, but I'd have no voting right on it on the night. And so I'm not so sure about that, having to email the day before. I don't really see the need for it. And the fact that you have no voting rights, really, it doesn't matter where you're sitting and what makes live, as long as the members is sitting in the right place. And on the stack meetings there, I note that it's 2 to 4 and 4 to 7, 7. So the 2 to 4 one it usually goes on 3 hours, but that'd be only allowing 2 hours. Is that the environmental service one would be the 2 to 4? Because if it is, probably that's sufficient time to get it done. Like, you know, I presume it's more than time, but it's just that we've cut an hour on that. But I wouldn't envisage a problem on that, I don't think.
Okay, so Chair, just in relation to the speaking rights, the rationale is actually not so much around the seating, but to allow for the agenda planning and for the briefing of the Chair. I don't think 24 hours notice is too burdensome. I would certainly suggest we would trial that. And we do require then, particularly in the context of aligning the mics or whatever, to work out where the seating for that would be. It would be very unusual. I'm not aware of any other council that members would just turn up and advise routinely that they would speak. So I think it is better to have a structure to it. In terms of the committee meetings, yes, Councillor Green, just to confirm, it would be environmental services proposed at 2 o'clock. Oh, no, we could go earlier, you know, so we could do a morning meeting. We could then do a 2 p.m. and 7 or whatever. But looking at the agendas and the duration of committees thus far, we think it probably does give sufficient time. Members will also be aware traditionally the July agendas aren't very heavy because a lot of the business is actually conducted at the June meetings. So I think it would be sufficient in the event that we needed to go beyond or it was going to take the full time or longer. I think we would seek to alert the chairs of the next meeting that we may need a little more time.
Thanks, Alison. Yeah, no, I think the 2 to 4 is I'm happy enough for that. Just back on the committee meetings, when you say is to regulate the agenda or to have the in what context, like, you know, if I turned up for an environmental service and there's 5, 10 items on it that I want to ask a question on, have I then to email in each question that I'm going to, or can I just turn up and ask a question at any time during that meeting?
So, Chair, what I'm proposing, which should be the norm that has worked on the planning committee, is a member who isn't on the committee in question would email through, and let's say it was agendas items 3, 4, 5 and 6, whatever the report, those numbers would be, that you wish to comment on those reports. The chair would then be advised, and it would mean that the chair knows in terms of managing the meeting. Because I think the other suggestion, let's say we have a number of members not on the committee seeking to speak, the primary requirement of the chair is to progress through the business on the agenda. And if we're going to have a number of speakers on every item, it's appropriate that the chair would at least be informed of that. It's not intended as a as a restriction. It's purely intended to regulate the meeting.
Councillor Coyle?
Thank you. I don't know if, I'll propose because I'm happy enough with the stacking. Just on the speaking rights, I was just going to ask, and the answer is probably going to be no anyway, but if we did attend a meeting that we don't sit on, and are we allowed to submit, or do we have to do it to a member, any urgent business? Can we not do that, or contact the chair, or we have to do it for a member?
Okay, I think, Chair, it's important to differentiate between, I suppose, members and non-members. So the committee would be dealing with the agenda business. Any other urgent business would be raised by members of the committee, would be the norm as to how that would be dealt with. And I think those arrangements have worked fairly effectively. I would say we should trial these arrangements, and if there is a view that there are matters not being dealt with or not being raised, then we could revisit that. But yeah. I personally, I would have thought there's plenty of scope for the matters to be raised. A member not on the committee could always advise the chair of any given matter, and the chair themselves can highlight the query or the issue.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Deacon?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I will second the approval of the recommendations, Chair. Just in relation to the speaking rights for non-committee members, I want to welcome that, Chair. I think that it will provide non-committee members of the opportunity to raise important points, and I do welcome that. I was wondering if non-committee members would be able to avail of refreshments and expenses. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, I will, in terms of refreshments, I don't see that as being a difficulty other than if we're notified, obviously. In terms of expenses, and I'll maybe defer to Catherine in this regard, my understanding is once you're designated a member of the committee, that becomes an allowable duty. I think if you're attending additional meetings to which you are not a member, it is not something that you can claim travel, is my recollection. So it isn't if they're not on the committee. Okay. Just specifies approved duties. No, sorry, only approved duties would be eligible for the expenses reimbursement.
Councillor Donnelly?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a question in relation to the speaking rights. Is it possible for people to join online if they're not a member of the committee with speaking rights? I know the legislation is to be reviewed. Do we have to wait until that happens? Yes.
So yes, Chair, we can't facilitate any access by way of virtual attendance or including speaking rights while we have no legislative basis to do so. As soon as the legislation is in, and I think there was a broad expectation it would be in by now, so I don't know what the delay is, we would be able to facilitate speaking rights remotely or in person.
Thank you.
Councillor Ovens?
Thank you, Chair. And it's more just it's a comment on the issue of the stacking of the meetings. And I mean, I'm only on this committee, and I see the proposal is we're to meet at 7 p.m, so it doesn't particularly affect me either. But I'm just conscious that now moving the other two committees to during the working day, 2 p.m. and 4 p.m, I mean, that'll upset a number of people in terms of working balances and everything like that. So, I mean, there is you need to weigh up the pros and cons of this, and I don't particularly see the benefit. I appreciate what's going on that week. Thursday is an election day, but ultimately people who are involved in those campaigns will presumably be as busy at 4 p.m. as they would be at 7 p.m. So I just don't see the particular benefit. I see quite a lot of disruption to scheduling of other councillors, and I say it doesn't affect me because it's 7 p.m. either. I think the only changes from a Wednesday to a Thursday or something like that. But I'm just conscious of the impact it would have on the other 39 members. So.
I suppose, Chair, just to say from our perspective, we've are able to proceed as scheduled and planned the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The feedback has been universally positive that we would move to a stacked meeting on the Tuesday. So we've had no adverse comment and no one has indicated any disruption.
Councillor O'Reilly.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose just on a technical point there that when Catherine said approved duty there, if we are passing this here tonight, then does that not push it into the realm of an approved duty? So just wondering on that as a technical sort of point. On the other one then, I suppose, yes, willing to no great objection to the trialing of it. I disagree with the whole concept, as people well know. I think it should be full committees. But that aside, what happens there when you're saying that 24 hours prior you must give indication that you wish to speak, and there's late items that pop onto agendas or things like that? If that ever occurs, you'd see from time to time that more for the full council meeting than for committees, but I suppose it's not beyond the realm of possibility.
So Chair, no, firstly, we can get some further advice on the approved duties, but certainly my understanding is once you're designated a member of a committee, that makes it an approved duty. If you're not designated as a member, irrespective of your choice whether to attend or to speak, it's not an approved duty, but we will clarify that. In terms of the additional items occurring, no, I suppose the basis on which we would operate as members would know. So the agenda would be posted 5 days before the meeting. There would be no additional items added. The only thing that may occur would be correspondence. I accept that. But it would be highly unusual that late correspondence would come to the committees. It's much more to the council meeting because we even deal with the matters arising and so on at the council meeting. I mean, I would imagine, Chair, that the chairs of the committees would exercise some discretion in that regard, or if something occurred or was posted subsequent to 12 noon the day before, that would be recognised, but it wouldn't be the norm, to be fair.
Okay, no more speakers on that, and it has been proposed and seconded. So thank you. We'll move on to item 5.3, is to consider the report on the South West Acute Hospital Strategic Development Group, paper I.
Thank you, Chair. So really, Chair, the purpose of this report is as set out, and last June, the Council agreed that then Council Chair, Councillor O'Reilly and myself would accept an invitation to participate in the Strategic Development Group. The terms of reference were subsequently reported, and you'll see from the report that there have been 4 meetings, August and October of last year, and March and April of this year. I just noticed a type with the terms of reference were approved on August 2023 as opposed to 2024, my apologies. So as the group is approaching its first anniversary, and we've also obviously had our annual meeting, so our membership will change to our current chair, Councillor McCloughery. I thought it was appropriate, Chair, to bring the report to you. Councillor O'Reilly and I did meet with the Trust as part of their review. I think it's our understanding that there may be some amendments proposed to the terms of reference. Those have not yet been shared with us. The next meeting of the group is scheduled for, I think it's Friday, the 19th of July, and that we don't obviously have an agenda. I'm sure Councillor O'Reilly will wish to comment, Chair, but you'd have seen from the minutes, probably the group is not, it's quite general in its approach. I think there maybe had been an expectation that there would be a very particular focus on the South West Acute Hospital. I think that is some of the feedback that has been received, and maybe a desire for it to move into more strategic territory. That said, I think our view would be, certainly my own view, it was probably better to be part of the conversation than to be outside of the dialogue, but ultimately it is a decision for the council as to whether or not we continue to participate. But again, I defer to Councillor O'Reilly, Chair.
Councillor O'Reilly.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose it is timely that as we change over the chair that goes along with the chief executive, that the trust and the group itself recognise that there is a deficit in the strategic approach to the overall work of the group, and that maybe too much of a concentration on the, as Alison has stated, the general operational aspect of the hospital and the wider trust, I suppose. I think useful information is derived from being part of the meeting in being able to at least have 2 bites at the cherry, as it were, through the health subcommittee being the other, and to be able to do this. I think if the ambition of the trust, which they say is to make it more streamlined and more strategic, actually materialises, then it will be an effective body to sit on and to be able to garner some information that, and particularly if the sequencing of the meetings alongside of the health subcommittee meeting is programmed as they envisage to do that, then it will be certainly of a benefit to our health subcommittee to be able to be forearmed with some information to be able to contribute to the health subcommittee. So I don't know exactly how much real benefit we got over the year, but I think it was always a new operation to be able to have a trial and see how it went, and then to review, which is happening. And I think hopefully if the anticipated approach materialises, it would be useful to be sitting on that group and to be able to allow the council to input their views and concerns, and then to be able to have a forum to garner direct information from the wider trust management there. So I would say that it is a useful exercise, Chair.
Do you want to propose the recommendations, Councillor O'Reilly?
I would do indeed.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Deehan?
Thank you, Alison, for your report, and Councillor O'Reilly for his comments. I want to second the approval of the recommendation, Chair. I think that this is a really important group, and I think it's vital that this council is represented on it. And I know that they will, the council will be well served by our chief executive and by our chair. Just with reference to the terms of reference, I mean, the purpose of the group, as it's stated in the report, is very impressive. It's just exactly what we need: to operate as a collaborative grouping of senior influencers and stakeholders whose shared purpose is to support the long-term sustainability and development of SWA as an acute hospital, and who will act as a strategic think tank and advisory group to the Trust corporate management team and the Western Trust board. So this is just exactly what we need, Chair. It's disappointing to hear that in the first year of its operation, it quite possibly hasn't fulfilled that purpose. But I think that there is an awareness within the council that this is the direction of travel that has to be insisted upon. And certainly looking at the membership of the Strategic Development Group, it's a very impressive list of people, including independent community stakeholders and also a service user representative. So I would be hopeful that things will change going forward, but it's actually a key group in terms of maintaining the sustainability of the SWA as an acute hospital. So I strongly support our continuing involvement with this group, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coyle?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think it should continue because I think all communication with the trust is really, really important, especially with recently the department have had, they're putting together a group and looking at the stroke services again, and you can see that coming down the line. There's great concern in our hospital regarding that work that's being done in the department at the minute. There's not that much in it really that hasn't been discussed, I suppose, in terms of concerns that have come to us as councillors and that we've discussed in the health and social care group. But I do think that, like Josephine says, there are independent stakeholder and community workers there. So I just think it's a really good thing to carry on, and we need that communication in a positive way. And I think even the health and social care group has been really positive this year as well. All our communication's been good, but we need to keep an eye on what is coming down the road as well.
Thank you, Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, anything that can be done to try and maintain the SWA and get it back to be run the way it should be run. I remember as councillors, I don't know, many of us was here at the time, and I'm not sure many years ago it is, when it was just before it was opened, the council and councillors were given a walk around the new facility. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, it's just fantastic. We were being told that it was the most modern hospital in Western Europe at the time. And I am just flabbergasted at the fact that we're talking 10 years or so later about trying to keep services in it. There was supposed to be cross-border links. There was all sorts of things. But if we take a look at that hospital and that facility, any region, any country in the world would be just absolutely crying out for it to have a facility like it. And we, due to incompetence, both now and in the past, are sitting trying and saying we can't get staff for it. It's absolutely unbelievable. Like, I've said it once and I'll say it again. If we were in Australia, Enniskillen would be like a suburb of Sydney or Melbourne or whatever. Like, we're 70 mile down the road. Like, we have countries, vast countries, that 70 mile is just is nothing. And we are talking about it as if it was Outer Mongolia. And I think I did quote it before. Outer Mongolia seems to have far more doctors and nurses per capita than we can conjure up. It's pure incompetence, and I'm hopeful that it will turn around. But I have very, very little belief in the leadership and of the trust and of the department. But hopefully, I'll be proved wrong.
Okay. That has been proposed and seconded, and we've heard several comments, so we will move on to number 6 on the agenda, which is correspondence. Now, we had the 3 items listed at the start of the meeting in correspondence. Is there any other correspondence? No, there's no other correspondence. So we'll move on to number 7, and there's just one item which I am aware of. So I will pass over to the Chief Executive.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Just to advise members, you'll be aware that the Council was shortlisted for the Royal Town Planning Institute Planning Authority of the Year. So just to advise that today we were advised of our success, and the Council has won that award for Northern Ireland. And the Chair of the Planning Committee, Councillor Maguire, together with officers from the Planning Department, collected the award. And the team will now go forward to the London finals, which I think are due in October. So a very good outcome.
Okay, that's excellent news. Okay, that is all under item 7. we will now move into confidential. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Donnelly, seconder. Councillor Hawkes. Please, Donal. Okay, I will now pass over to the Chief Executive to give us a summary of what happened while we were confidential.
Thank you, Chair. While in committee, the committee considered the confidential report on staff matters, agreed with the recommendation and noted the other updates, and also discussed a number of related governance matters, Chair.
Thank you. Proposed by Councillor Deacon, seconder. Councillor Coyle. Okay, thank you for giving me a relatively smooth evening in the chair for the first time again. And all being well, we'll see you sometime in July. I can't remember what date it was since it started. 2nd of July. So thank you, everybody.